Hello everybody, this module presents the highlights of the essay Spontaneity, Its Strength and Weakness, which is an important chapter in Frantz Fanon's book titled The Wretched of the Earth. The Wretched of the Earth, published in 1961, was written by Ibrahim Frantz Fanon during the height of the Algerian War of Independence. The insightful deliberations of this book provide inspiration for all anti-colonial movements. Frantz Fanon was a French West Indian psychiatrist who exposed the connection between colonial war and mental ill health and showed how the fight for liberation must be combined with building a national culture and then achieved through revolutionary violence. Black Skin, White Masks is another book in which Fanon shares his own experiences in addition to presenting the effects of racism and dehumanization inherent in situations of colonial domination. Fanon's ideas were thought-provoking and they influenced the post-colonial critical studies. Decolonization, that is the liberation of a nation, cannot be sought on the basis of a gentleman's agreement. It is a never-ending perennial struggle. Fanon assures that violence as a powerful tool has a magical impact on the indigenous people as it struggles to slough off their sense of inferiority and empowers them. In the chapter titled Spontaneity, Its Strength and Weakness, Fanon reiterates the importance of violence in the process of decolonization. In the opening lines of the chapter, Fanon identifies a difference of rhythm between the leaders of the Nationalist Party and the mass of the people. In the colonized countries, the leaders of the parties are the educated town dwellers, whereas the mass of people include the peasants. There is always a discontentment between the rank and file and their leaders. The former continues to demand for a total change to happen, while the latter restrains and limits the demands of the workers. The parties evince a distrust for the rural folks, and the peasants find themselves betrayed. The members of the parties are the shop stewards, industrial workers, intellectuals, and shopkeepers who believe in technical advances and venture to change the traditional customs. On the other hand, the peasants continue to uphold long cherished values and fortify traditional customs. Here we find a lot of marabouts, that is the African Muslim religious leaders, witch doctors and customary chieftains among the country dwellers. Fanon is of the view that the intellectual national parties miserably failed to address the needs of the rural folk, and this had led to a division between the two. According to Fanon, this division is a division between the colonized population. The country folks support the townsmen because the latter ape their European masters and re-establish the tactics of the colonial missionary. Hence, the country folks call them as traitors and knaves as they uphold the policies of colonialism. The country people continue to look at the townsfolk as immoral and untrustworthy. This antagonism between the native and his counterpart creates a favorable ambience for the colonial powers to continue their exploitation. Fanon also points out the cunning plotting of the leaders of the party. They derive vicarious pleasure by remaining indifferent and unwilling to plunge into serious action. They also refuse to direct the propaganda towards the rural masses. It is ironic that the peasants are the real participators in any revolution. They are the most spontaneous and aggressive lot. Although the leaders of the party fail to organize the country districts, they ruthlessly sabotage the living tradition of the natives. Moreover, the leaders did not help the country folks to channelize their spontaneity and rage in a proper way. Thereby, they pose a threat to the native society. The peasants were denied of their political education, the traditional chiefs were looked down upon, and the old men in the traditional societies were held up to ridicule. The cunning colonialists exploit this unhealthy situation by setting the peasants against the city dwellers. On their part, the parties failed to take part in the struggle and played a dual role. For example, during the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya, the British colonial authorities and the missionaries prevented the influx of the Kenyans from the country districts and forests. When these folks could not find a market for their labor, they became robbers, drunkards, and even prostitutes. The same thing happened in Congo when the countryside young hooligans were driven back into the forests. Like the political parties, that is the urban proletariat, the labor unions also isolated themselves from the peasants of the countryside. But the peasant masses are the only aggressive force in the country, and according to Fanon, they are the important lot for any revolutionary cause. At times of rebellion in town, the peasants relocate to the cities and are ready with their makeshift shanties. The struggle always assumes titanic shapes. Sometimes the party ruptures and divisions were created. Some leaders were marked out for police repression under the colonialists. They were boycotted and hence they ran towards the countryside and the peasants protected them from the police. There came the right moment for them to discover that the mass of country people have never stopped to think in terms of violence, repossessing land, national struggle, and armed insurrection. Fanon describes the lumpen proletariat as members of the peasant masses occupying the lowest rung of the social order. They were usually criminals, unemployed, prostitutes, and juvenile delinquents. In spite of the pressurizing situations and constant danger, the lumpen proletariat had its own logic and these idlers could not be reformed. But the colonial machinery devised ways to exploit the lumpen proletariat. The cry for any national liberation can easily grab the attention of the lumpen proletariat. They can easily be persuaded to take up arms with the colonialists. In this bargain, the colonizers were easily cheated the lumpen proletariats. Fanon gives examples of what happened in Algeria, Angola, and Congo. In Angola, the lumpen proletariats precede the Portuguese armed columns, and in Congo, the lumpen proletariat were used by the enemies of Congo to organize spontaneous mass meetings against Lumumba, the first president of Congo. It is very obvious from what Fanon presents that the enemy, not only the colonizers but also the other privileged, is too aware of the ideological weaknesses, spiritual instability of the population, and the physiological wretchedness of the peasants. Owing to the colonialist maneuvers, the sociologists throw light on various complexes: frustration complex, belligerent complex, and the colonizability complex. The native's consciousness is so precarious and weak that he is taken aback even by a spark of kindliness. But Fanon warns that the native can go in for a small compromise but never should surrender. As concluding note, Fanon affirms that it is, I quote, "Violence alone, violence committed by the people, violence organized and educated by its leaders, makes it possible for the masses to understand social truths. Independence does not mean a few readaptation, reforms, or a flying flag with an undivided mass still living in the dark ages. Dear students, I hope you enjoyed listening to this presentation. For an in-depth understanding of the text, kindly go in for a close reading of Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. Thank you.